What happens when your stepfather is one of the most prolific and mystical composers of the 20th century, and your mother writes a raw, poetic memoir about him after his death? You don't just tell their story, you compose it. Today's guest is Bill Holst. He is the co-author and family archivist, the curator behind Alan Hovhaness, Unveiling One of the Greatest Composers of the 20th Century. This is a memoir like no other. It's built from the writings of his late mother. She was Hinoko Fujihara Hovhaness. And the book gives readers this deeply personal, intimate look into the life, the genius, the eccentric soul of the composer, whose 500 plus works are these spiritual, uplifting soundscapes that are finding a new audience here 25 years later. Bill, hello. Welcome to the Books That Make You show.
Good afternoon.
All right, let's dig right in, because this is a little bit different than what we usually have. Usually we're talking to the sole author of a book. So you co-wrote this or co-authored it with your mother, but your mother had been passed away. Can you talk about the structure of the book? How did that work? Kind of working with your mother after her death to take her writings, her poetry, her journaling, and turning it into this magnificent memoir.
So how it all began from her standpoint is that throughout her life, she kept a diary of all her activities throughout the day. And once Alan passed on in 2000, she started writing poems to Alan. And after about 5 years, so about 2005, she had accumulated hundreds of these poems. And it was at that point that she decided that she would needed to document Alan's stories. So similar to some of the other famous composers that had stories about them, she wanted to do a firsthand account for all those activities. So she went back to the original diary entries, created short stories from them, and fact-checked them. And so she had compiled this a group of stories, and it was her intention to publish that as a book. However, around 2017, she started having illness, and she was never able to complete that. After her passing in December of 2022, my wife and I realized what this meant to her and to Alan. And so that was our first priority once she passed, was to be able to put this book together and publish it, so the whole world would be able to more than just know Alan as a composer, but also know his personalities, know some of the quirky stories that they had, and document some of the important events that occurred behind the scenes of the classical music world.
Yeah.
So my wife and I, we had to, it's not necessarily linear. We did try and have it chronological, but a lot of the stories, start off like, I woke up this morning and I had a dream about a story that Alan told me, about the 1940s. So you're flashback to that period. So like I say, all these stories are not linear, but they are chronological for when she thought of them.
Sure. How about describing for us who Alan Hovhaness was, and why does his legacy matter? How can you describe his music to somebody who might be unfamiliar with it?
Right. So Alan was a highly criticized person. His music, he always believed in producing and composing music that was right for him. He didn't sway his music to any current fads or anything of that nature. He tried to compose the essence of music, harmonically, and beautiful music that was healing. So the story really is about a person who was highly criticized and was able to educate himself in different cultures and be able to put that into his compositions and just create beautiful music.
You say that he was criticized. Can you talk about that a little bit more? What were people saying about him?
So I'm not a music theorist or Alan Hovhaness historian, so some of these dates and names may be questioned, but to my understanding and through my understanding Alan, back in 1942, he earned a scholarship to Tanglewood, and he had some classmates, Aaron Copland and Leonard Bernstein, and during one of their class activities, they would bring in a composer in that classroom, and they would play some of his pieces, and they would give their opinions about that music. So when it was Alan's day to play his symphony, Aaron Copland talked over his piece, and Leonard Bernstein called it ghetto music. And so Alan was very much humiliated, and he ended up leaving Tanglewood, and that's where he relied on his Greek psychic friend Herman D.G. Ovano, and he urged Alan to compose using his heritage, the Armenian culture, into that. And then later on, Alan's studies took him to India, Japan, and Korea. And those all, again, ancient music techniques that he embedded into his music.
It kind of just reminds me of, that's what music critics said about rap music back in the day. That's what music critics said about rock and roll back in the day. It was the devil music. And it really sounds like it was because Alan was actually ahead of his time. And you bring up such an important point because he did draw from other cultures, and he had this mystical sound to him as well. Plus, he had plenty of folks he collaborated and worked with that we're still hearing those influences today, like Carlos Santana and Ravi Shankar. Can you talk a little bit about the mystical side and maybe tell us a composition or two that folks can check out if they want to find out what Alan's music sounded like?
Right. So Alan always said that he heard music in his head, and he thought that everyone did. And so as early as the age of 4, he would, have a piece of paper and pencil and jot down the music as it played in his head. And even, when we knew him, he always carried a notepad and pen in his pocket, because he didn't, if you missed that music, then it would be gone forever. I had talked to some of his friends, Lawrence Sobel, who was a clarinet player in New York, who was very close to him. We kind of agreed on this, is that he told me that Alan was not of this world or of this time. And I always thought Alan was very much in tune with the universe. So his soul was able to capture, nature sounds, what the mountains, what the wind, what the trees are telling us, and convert that into music. So I kind of see Alan as this receiver of other dimensions or nature.
And it's interesting the way you describe how he thought that if he didn't capture the music then and there, that it would go away, as if he was receiving it. He wasn't, and a lot of writers talk about it this way too, how the story, the characters in the story will come and talk to them. It feels similar, but with music. I don't know. I think that's really fascinating. And I also think another thing that's pretty fascinating too, if you don't mind me adding, is that spiritual aspect. And as I understand it, he had an affinity for cats. And he even thought of one of his cats as being reincarnated. Is that so?
Correct. So I had talked to Alan, many times over dinner while my mother was doing dishes or washing the dishes. So he would tell me different stories. And one of, because he had to go and study different cultures, he studied Indian culture quite a bit. So he was very familiar with reincarnation. He did have the belief that he was a Egyptian musician, and how close Egyptians are to their cats. He believed that his cat, black cat, Raja Hoyden, was reincarnated from that time. Alan also has other beliefs that he was a composer musician during the time of Leonardo da Vinci. As a matter of fact, there was a psychic that had drawn a picture, not seeing or knowing Alan, had drawn a picture from what he perceived of Alan. And later on, when they compared it, it looked very much like Alan, Persian king. But as far as the musician for Leonardo da Vinci, Alan gave us the name of who that was. We looked it up, and sure enough, that was a real person.
That's fascinating. And we mentioned a few folks, but he had other major figures who he was associated with and who he worked with. Yoko Ono, John Cage. We mentioned Carlos Santana. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the music that Carlos Santana or any of those may have produced as a result of being so close to Alan?
Right. So Alan was his masterpiece, and it's debatable, but I think generally everyone thinks of Alan with Mysterious Mountain, which is his second symphony. And I think Carlos Santana is, he likes all kinds of music. He reads a lot of books. He did do a interpretation of Alan's Mysterious Mountain on his Oneness album. So yes, he really liked that piece and did a translation of that.
So that's a good place for folks to start too. If they're like, okay, what's the first song I should listen to? Mysterious Mountain might be a good starting point for folks.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. And so Alan also had contacts with so in the 50s and 60s, he actually resided in New York City. So he had a lot of contacts. There's a lot of people from Woodstock that, are familiar with him, just because he was classical music, he did, go cross genres in different music. And so they knew of each other. So in the, I believe it was the late 50s, in New York, there was a group of artists and composers, sculptors, and things like that kind of had a small group that they would hang out together. And Alan was quite close with John Cage and Yoko Ono. In fact, he used to tell me stories about he was driving around New York and Yoko would recite poetry to him. And then his contacts with Woodstock, of course, Carlos Santana, also Richie Havens, also performed at Woodstock. And then his close friend, the clarinetist, Larry Sobel, also, I think, had some ties into promotions of Woodstock.
And there were what, like 1,000 and such compositions that he actually destroyed, didn't he? There was stuff that he didn't want released out there. Is that true?
Right. So after he was humiliated there at Tanglewood, he went and he burned over 1,000 of his compositions in his fireplace. And there are some from that period that were saved, but the majority of them were destroyed.
Now, there's some unpublished works as well that you discovered. Can you talk about
Correct.
that?
Yeah. So prior to my mother's death, she had a list of unpublished music, and she has them all in the archives. So there is, maybe 15 or 20 of those. I don't know if they're all, there's a couple symphonies and the rest are just, maybe choral pieces, something like that. But we currently are in their house, doing this archival, just going through the house, like in the piano bench, we find compositions of like a Valentine that he wrote for my mother. There's a couple of those, and he'd write cards to people, and there'd be compositions on that. So we're finding a lot of stray compositions that have never been published, and so there's many of those.
And do you have plans for publishing them? Is that something you're considering?
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do, but eventually we would like to do that. We've already had a local group want to play some of his the 2 Valentine pieces that he had written, and I'd like to do his premiere for that. So eventually, yeah, we'd like to publish those.
What were Alan's midnight discussions all about?
Yeah, so if someone described Alan, it's usually a very polite, gentle, respectful person, but most of his composing and other storytelling was after midnight. So from midnight to 4 o'clock, he got very active into his storytelling, and very animated. Some of the subjects that he talked about were, of course, stories about other composers, Beethoven, Mozart, Sibelius, not necessarily the music side of them, but, the maybe untold stories behind them. Francis Bacon, he loved talking about Francis Bacon. My mother used to get real worried because he would get so excited when he talked about Francis Bacon. I've had conversations with him about Edgar Cayce. So, yes, after midnight, Alan became a very animated and wild.
And your mother, she was very talented. Actually, you have a very talented family. Can you tell us more about who your mother was?
So my mother, she grew up in a very poor Japanese family over in Japan. Actually, it was my grandmother that really embedded the artistic creativity into her children. So she was a Korean woman going to college in Japan, which at that time, was unheard of. Korean woman in Japan and going to college. But she met my grandfather, who was a Japanese surgeon, and his family didn't necessarily accept the Korean family, and so my grandfather actually passed away when my mother was 2, and so there wasn't much support from the Japanese family for these Korean children. But my grandmother, the government at that time allowed them to harvest yams in the government property, so that's how they ate. And like I say, they were very poor. But my grandmother took my mother and her sister to art shows, and my grandmother would talk with, some of the artists. And so that kind of embedded some of the artistic thoughts into my mother and my aunt. So after high school, my mother actually went away to, there was a music studio that was, 20 miles away. She'd have to take the train, but she actually got an internship at the movie studio. There she was able to do some short commercials, advertisement for calendars. She'd, do like sake or something like that. She also was in 2 movies. Of course, she was just a background actress, but she had that. She also studied singing, and then during the Korean War, she was actually a nightclub singer, and that's where she met my father. Once she came over to America with my father, then they had 2 girls, and then I was the youngest. But my mother continued her singing career. She sang in the Seattle Opera Chorus, and she also was a soloist throughout the Seattle area in churches.
And Alan composed or wrote for her to sing.
That's correct. Right. So after they were married in 1977, then Alan's music kind of went towards supporting her career. And so he wrote several symphonies and pieces for her voice, which was higher than what he was normally composing for, because she was a soprano. So there was a noticeable, pitch difference in most of his compositions. But he did quite a few compositions for her and performances.
That's lovely. It sounds like she was very much a muse to him. And it also sounds, this book is as much of a memoir and a bit of the history as it is a love story, don't you think?
Right. And talking to her before she passed on is like I say, they wanted everyone to know Alan as a person. And so it originally started as a documentation and storytelling and such like that. But, her writing, I had to edit her writing. She wanted to keep what she called the Orientalness in it. So it's not, fancy sentence structure or anything like that with glittery words or anything like that. It's, it can be choppy at times, but that's kind of what she wanted to display is the true personality of her and Alan. And so we kept that as much as we could in that. The love story part, yes. So she gets very detailed about the different phases. So there are phases of displaying their love. So initially, it's the romantic side. When they first met, they went on, several trips and did performances and things like that. And so that was kind of the romantic side. And then the book phases into more like the family person for Alan. And so that family type love. And then there's the part where Alan has his illness and, she has to care for him, obviously not the best scenario for anyone, but it showed their love for each other. She tried to help him as much as she could during that period. And of course, he tried to stay alive for my mother as much as he could. And so there's that love. And then the end of the book is more of, once Alan had passed on, then my mother showing, the love for Alan that she's longing for, that she had lost.
Yeah, it's grieving, and that's what true love is. It's easy to love somebody during the good times, but it's honest and authentic when you're doing it through the rough times too.
Right.
And I can see behind you, it looks like you might have some poignant family pictures behind you too. So that's really incredible that you're able to do this, Bill, coming in as somebody who is giving your mother's voice and the story and her desire to make Alan one of the most famous composers of the 20th century. Had you ever imagined yourself a writer or a co-author, shall we say? Is this something you ever foresaw for yourself before recently?
No. So, I was a systems avionics engineer for 38 years, and I wrote a lot of documents, technical documents, and definitely writing requirements versus writing this book is totally different. And so, no, I originally didn't see this being the youngest child. I didn't think I was actually going to fit into this position, but I think my mother thought maybe I was the most consistent of the children, and so she relied on me. In fact, in her will, that was something that I had to kind of strive for, is to help promote Alan's music. So, since we've been here, it's been a year now since we've been in the house archiving all the material. What we've done is that, I knew Alan personally, but, reading through a lot of the material, we're finding new things every single day. And we're finding really how important Alan actually is. I mean, not only to the music world, but, he had to study and live those cultures. So he's really an important person. I think his story needs to be told to everyone.
How does that feel, Bill, being the steward of a legacy, co-author again in a woman's voice too, and you do such a great job honoring and keeping your mother's voice as a writer? How does that feel to you? Because, yeah, you didn't really expect it, but obviously your mother saw something and wanted this for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's an honor doing that, especially for Alan. I mean, Alan, and I were very close, and I'd always promised him that I would try and do as much as I could for his music. So, again, like you say, it was unexpected, but we're seeing how important this is. So, some of my retirement time is gone away, and we have to do this important task.
Very important work indeed. And you're doing it in an auspicious year, the 25th anniversary of Alan's passing. We talked a little bit about Mysterious Mountain, where people can start if they want to, experience some of his music. Can you tell folks too where they can go to find out more about his music, if perhaps they want to, even if they want to perform the music? You offer that. You have a website with more information, a more intimate look at Alan and your mother, and give us the details. Where can people go to find out more?
Yeah, our website is alanhovhanessmusic.com. And of course, if you want to have a sample of his music, you can just log on to YouTube and search for Hovhaness, and there are hundreds of different audio, video things that you can listen to. So I would start there, and like you say, the alanhovhanessmusic.com, you'll be able to learn more about Alan. You'll be able to purchase the book and also music from that website.
Excellent. Bill Holst talking about Alan Hovhaness, one of the greatest composers of the 20th century. The book co-written with you and your mother. Truly a spectacular undertaking indeed. And you can find the music as well as the book on the website. And the book is available Amazon, all those places. It's being published by Peanut Butter Press, so people can go and find copies of the book. And as I understand it too, you also have a special edition of the book. So there's the hardback version, but then there's a hardback that's in a box type set. So it's something that collectors and people who really perfect for gift giving. So people can grab that copy too if they so choose.
Yes, correct. Yeah, the box is very nicely decorated, and the collector's book also is bound in leather, which is really nice.
Bill Holst, thank you so much for joining us today on the Books That Make You show. A pleasure talking to you. And thank you everybody else for joining us as well. You can find out more on our website. It is booksthatmakeyou.com. We're also on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, ring the bell, make sure you're getting notifications and all of that. Do leave a comment below. It helps the channel to grow. Plus, you can also sign up on the website for our Webby award-winning Books That Make You newsletter, so you never miss great interviews with folks like Bill. And we do giveaways and lots of fun stuff. We present the Book Fest every season. So make sure you subscribe. Don't miss out on the Books That Make You website. Until next time, all of my bookish buddies, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are.